All right. Well, welcome to a special edition of TKT360, our post-IBC edition.
So,
All right. I think we're back with our technical difficulties. So, you didn't get to go, Marianne, but I did get to go to
yes.
IBC
So
this
tell
year.
me, tell me, tell me, tell me, what cool things did you see?
Well, I have to say, so the good news was that it felt like a traditional IBC. The crowd seemed to be as full as always. The halls were full. The vendors were there, which was great. However, there wasn't any, at least I didn't see any earth-shattering announcements. There were a lot of new product updates as usual, enhancements to products. There seemed to be maybe a pulling back a little bit on cloud as a core component, but but being pushed more as, and I think more appropriately as an additional element to your production environment. So I spent a lot of time looking at actually camera lenses, which was a big thing for
Ooh.
me this year, and a lot of lightweight cinema primes were out there.
So why do you think we're not seeing the innovation? And I noticed that at NAB that I just didn't feel that there was any wow. Why do you think we're missing that?
You know, I'm wondering if yeah, I think it's multivariate. There's a lot of things. I think one is, I think the industry's still trying to, as we come out of the pandemic, and there was this big push, everything's going remote. That's the way to do it. We learned how to do it. We were forced to do it, primarily in the pandemic, but it's great. Now that we've sort of come out of that, I think organizations are trying to really figure out what makes sense, what doesn't make sense. We sort of go through these big cycles. We had I always joke that we went through a period where it would take decades to go from SD to HD or to go from analog to digital. And then over like the last 3 years prior to the pandemic, it was just a ton. IPs, 2110, 2022, HDR, OTT, 4K, 8K. There was so much for everybody to wrap their heads around. And I think that organizations have sort of taken a step back maybe this year and are really trying to figure this stuff out. I mean, that's sort of the sense I got from talking to several vendors was we're trying to figure it out. We're trying to see, potentially what the next big thing is, as much as what direction is our industry going. Is everything going OTT? Are we going back traditional? Is it going to be some type of hybrid model? And how do we build the tech for that? There wasn't a lot of talk of 8K this year. In the past, you always had 8K. NHK was probably the only one that I think had a demo of 8K. Adobe had their typical release of their editing software and special effects software, but they've really been pushing a beta model recently. So it's sort of like whatever was in beta becomes the release. So
Oh,
again,
yeah.
no earth-shattering announcements. So I think I was taken aback by that. And to your point is, I don't know where the innovation is.
One thing I've heard from radio broadcasters, smaller stations or independent operators, is they think, hey, the cloud is interesting, but we want hardware. Do you
Yeah.
hear that at all on the video side of things? And people are saying, you know what? We just love our pieces of hardware.
Yeah, I think for us, it's a little bit different on the video side, only from the standpoint of we used to have very specific built hardware with ASICs chips because the performance of COTS wasn't there. On the radio side, I think you have more tactile surfaces that you've got to
Sure.
manipulate. So the hardware always has to be there. So there's a big push for everything to become software over the last 5 to 8 years or so, maybe a little bit longer than that. And I think the hardware is finally, hardware meaning that the COTS, the common off the shelf servers and stuff, are finally capable of doing the things, and the manufacturers have built the software to do that. Now I think we're seeing a lot more integration of GPU into the hardware, realizing that we can't do it all in CPU, and the fact that you can get GPU based hardware in the cloud providers has enabled, I think, them to sort of, there was a big push in the past where you couldn't get GPUs in the cloud, so everybody had to do things in CPU. They were really sort of, I think, pushing the limits on what you could do in CPU. Now we've built it where they could both do GPU and CPU, and so I think you're starting to see more. People still want the hardware. I think that was one of the things I saw the most, or the question that came out the most, was how much does it cost for us to be in the cloud? That was a big thing.
Yes.
And then calculating that cost. Bigger organizations, the ABC, Disney, CBS's, Fox's of the world, the Sky, for them, they've got deeper pockets, and they've got a more global footprint anyhow, so that cloud really works for them, all the things in the cloud. But then you get into the smaller organizations, and not significantly smaller, but smaller organizations, they have to really start to question how much of this stuff's going to be in the cloud. I think everything is capable to be in the cloud. I think right now no one's really sure of, how do I go back and forth between the two? I've always said I hate the term hybrid, because that sort of means something does something specific, and then something else does something specific, and the two things sort of work together. I prefer a much more integrated solution, and I think I started seeing some of that when I had asked the vendors, well, can I run the cloud? Can I run in the on-prem? What does it look like between the two? And some of the solutions, especially in the play-out world, were a little more I guess, for lack of a better term, refined, that they're starting to build in that direction.
Excellent. Well, Philip, next month is the NAB AES in New York, so let's hope that we see some real innovation there. You never know.
No, exactly. So I will be there as well. We'll see you there.
Yeah,
and
perfect.
Hopefully everybody's just holding off for that one. Of course, then we have SVG, I think, in December as well, so maybe we'll see some innovation there. Maybe it's the innovations will be spread out throughout the year instead of just the big shows, but I still enjoy going to the big shows and seeing, I always joke that I wish there was an extra day just so I could go see all my friends, in the industry. But I'm glad that we have it. There, virtual conferences are nice, but there's, the ability to spend 2 or 3 days and put your hands on equipment and talk to the engineers and the salespeople and the architects of all the different companies over a 3-day period. It's invaluable in our industry. We're a visual industry, so you have to do that.
Exactly. Even for the audio, you just want to be there to touch the equipment. So, excellent.
Perfect. All right. So, well, thank you for joining us this week on TKT for the special IBC edition, and we will see you next Monday.